Mike here again. I want to start off this video by offering the caveat that I'm not normally a proponent of giving folks airtime that I consider to be either morons or insane. Well, unfortunately, we had a congressperson who qualifies as at least one of those two take the hill recently and offer her testimony that is so bad and so insane that I couldn't avoid taking the bait. I couldn't stay away from this one. I know she's probably trolling us, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, welcome to my show for the first and hopefully only time. So folks, I'm sure that you're going to enjoy this laugh with me, or you're going to do like I did and totally lose your mind over the ridiculous amount of insane nonsense that she's about to spew. So AOC, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ocasio-Cortez.
Mr. Chair, I would like to be sworn in.
I'm sorry?
I would like to be sworn in.
Oh, all right. We usually don't require swearing in, but you want to be sworn in? Fine.
So two things. Number one, she's there of her own volition, so she does not need to be sworn in. That's number one, and we'll come back to that in just a second. But number two, I believe, and I could very well be wrong on this, so I am happy to be corrected on this matter. Because of the oath to office that she's already taken, this process is redundant, and I think that's what Jerry's actually referring to. Also, yes, she's there of her own volition, which means that I'm pretty sure that even if she takes even if she is sworn in, she's not setting herself up for a perjury trap. So, lawyers, you can check on that for me. It's just an aside, but the whole point is, even if that's the case, as you will see, what she's about to provide as testimony is almost entirely hearsay. So, she's not setting herself up for a perjury trap. This is just a stunt. Not a big complaint, but it's going to lead to the next thing that we're going to have to talk about here. So, folks, just be aware, this is nothing more than a stunt.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Okay. Do you stand up, please. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated. Let the record reflect that Ms. Ocasio-Cortez answered in the affirmative. You may proceed.
Good morning, Chairman Cummings, Ranking Member Jordan, and distinguished members of this committee. When I was asked to testify today, I frankly didn't know where to begin after our...
Yes, he did. This whole bit is entirely scripted, and you'll notice that she doesn't get questioned at the end of this video, and we'll get to that in a minute. But every time that she has ever gone off script, every time she's ever done anything on the fly, she spouted out such unbelievable falsehoods that even a middle school student of civics could understand that what she's spouting out is just total garbage, just total nonsense. Every single time that she has been asked a question that wasn't an obviously pre-scheduled question, that wasn't a question that was obviously submitted to her before the interview, she's gaffed like you've never seen a gaffe before. Her gaffes are so numerous and so laughable the moment she goes off script. It is obvious when she is on script and when she is not. I'm 100% certain this is scripted and prepared, and Chakrabarty was the one who did it for you and told you exactly what to say and how to say, to an extreme that I bet you even that when she adjusted her microphone there, when she had that pause, she was counting in her head, 1, 2, 3, adjust the microphone. I just about guarantee you that microphone adjustment was something that was part of the script. But go on.
Visit to the border. Much has been made about the fact that we have said that this is a manufactured crisis.
Do you see her cadence there? That is not her cadence when she goes off script. When she goes into interviews, this is not the type of language that she uses. This is a clear indicator that she's going on script.
And in many ways, it is manufactured in that it is wholly unnecessary.
She doesn't understand what a manufactured crisis is. So the manufacturing of a crisis is when you have a situation which is in fact not a crisis. Not that it is a crisis and has been created by something. A manufactured crisis is when something is not a crisis. and you manufacture the situation so that the thing that we're talking about is a crisis or appears to be one. I'm sure any husband who's had the wife come home and say, I'm running late and I have to pick up the kids and, losing her mind, that is what we're talking about. Anytime that, a fellow loses his head during a soccer game or during a football game and gets into some brawl like an idiot, this is a manufactured crisis. So, just so we're all clear, she doesn't understand what a manufactured crisis is.
It is unnecessary to separate children from their families.
Yes. No, it's 100% necessary to separate children from families. We do it every single time that a divorce happens. We do it every single time a parent goes to jail. And there's a reason for that. We don't jail people who are innocent of crimes. We don't imprison anyone who has obviously not committed a crime to such an obvious degree that we're not even trying them for the crime. So, for example, if we have people who are crossing the border illegally and they're found, for example, in possession of drugs or illicit substances, then when we haul them off to a trial court, we have to separate these children from their families. Jesus. Not to mention that we don't know if the person who claims to be, say, their father is actually their father. Also, as you probably know, 80% of the females who cross the border, not women, 80% of females who cross the border are raped on the way across the border. Many of the times, the reason this is the case is because children are straight up sold by their mothers for not all that much money, to fellas who are looking to cross the border and claim the child as their own, right? So that they can get this, this treatment that they wouldn't normally get if they didn't have the kid next to them. So, yeah, we've got to do that. And also, when that happens, a lot of the times these kids get molested. And there's no way to know that that's going to be the case unless you actually try to separate the kids from the family. Maybe you want to get that testimony from the kid who doesn't have their abusive parent right next to them or the abusive God knows who that's not related to them next to them.
It is unnecessary to have a policy to detain innocent women and families that have harmed no person and are legally seeking asylum in the...
You idiot. There is an asylum process, which means that they have to be processed during their asylum claim. You can't just hurl them back out onto the United States because what happens is that they show up for their first court appearance and then they disappear. This is what has happened during the Obama administration. It is what has been happening for a few years now. So what you have to do is, since you can't put them through the process instantaneously because we can't defy the laws of physics, things take time. Yeah, you have to hold them, right? You have to hold them in some sort of facility that until they can get their hearing. And unfortunately, the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement and the Border Patrol are swamped with these cases. So, yeah, there's a line. Hello, Alexandria, they have to be indoors for this to sit in line. Jesus.
United States of America. It is unnecessary to have a policy that calls children unaccompanied when they arrive with older brothers, sisters, and grandparents.
We don't know that they are relatives until we find out that they are relatives. We don't just take people at their words. We try to do some research. We try to see if they have documentation to prove that's the case. We pull the kids aside and say, hey, is this really the case? You don't have to worry about us because we're not going to beat you up like they might be. And I'm not going to suggest that they are or that they even likely are, that even likely is the case. But for the love of God, we only know that they're relatives after we've determined that they're relatives. So until then, we have to determine that they're relatives. For God's sakes.
And treat them no differently than human traffickers.
Okay, before we determine that they're human traffickers, before we determine that they're not human traffickers, everybody gets treated the same.
Speaking of trafficking, it is completely unnecessary for this administration to choose to implement policies like metering and so-called remain in Mexico policies that dump innocent people in dangerous territories that puts them right in the crosshairs of human traffickers.
So what you're referring to is when somebody puts in an asylum claim and they are brought before, whatever, it's not, is it a court? I don't know if it's a court officially, but before some sort of magistrate of some kind who makes the determination as to whether or not their asylum claim is legitimate. Yes, what we do if their asylum claim is not legitimate is return them to the nearest country, which happens to be Mexico. For God's sakes, Alexandria, this is common sense.
Right for picking. This is a manufactured crisis because the cruelty is manufactured.
You see right there, folks, that little hesitation where she says she's about to say cruelty is manufactured? No, the cruelty is manufactured. Again, we're going on a script.
This is a manufactured crisis because there is no need for us to do this. There's no need for us to overcrowd and to detain and under-resource. There is no...
Right, because Democrats don't want to provide funding to Border Patrol and to ICE to actually have, for example, larger facilities, more facilities, have greater accommodations within the facilities. Yes, this is your party, right? This is your position, period. So you don't have my sympathy on this matter.
Need for us to arrest innocent people and treat them no differently than criminals when they are pursuing their basic human rights.
Number one, we don't treat them like U.S. citizens who are criminals. We treat them like they are people who are not U.S. citizens, who have illegally crossed the border because it is not legal to cross the border without going through a border checkpoint. That would be the case even if I did that. I'm a U.S. citizen. If I flew to Mexico, turned around, and walked across the border, I would be crossing the border illegally. So, no.
Much has been made about CBP agents in this hearing as well. And this is not their fault. And in many respects, I agree. Because it is a policy of dehumanization implemented by this executive administration.
They're not dehumanizing them. They're not considering them non-humans. They're considering them non-citizens. For fuck's sake, Alexandria, is there a difference between a human being and a citizen? Is there a difference between a citizen and a non-citizen? Right? Do we have that tree where we have human beings and then below that is citizens and non-citizens, where a citizen is a human being, a non-citizen is a human being, but a human being isn't necessarily a citizen or a non-human being. This is like fourth grade logic. Jesus.
Laid at the feet of Stephen Miller that create a tinderbox of violence and dehumanization where hurt people hurt people. I would like to seek unanimous consent to submit the records of the names of 17 women I met during my trip to the border.
Yeah, so what you're about to see is basically hearsay. Here's where this all begins.
I think one of the reasons and what has been spoken of is that there's two different universes, and it feels like we're speaking in two different worlds. And one of the reasons for that, I believe, is because when we took our tour of the border, one of the first things that we were told was that we were not allowed to speak to the migrants, that we were not allowed to have contact with them, that we shouldn't. And this was given for reasons of, quote, their safety or for the expediency of the tour.
Okay, so if this is happening with everyone who visits the border, then you don't have a complaint. So since we don't have anyone else in that room who has visited the border, who can attest to that fact, then again, you lose my sympathy, right? If that's just their policy and they institute that policy on everyone, then perhaps the policy is bad, but the actual Border Patrol agents have done the right thing, if that's the case.
And after we entered and after we were asked to surrender our cell phones at the beginning of the tour, we went in and one of the CBP officers, after that morning, it being revealed by ProPublica, which I would also seek unanimous consent to submit to the record.
ProPublica, a really reliable source.
While it was revealed by ProPublica, a secret Facebook group where CBP members were planning to harm or encouraging harm of myself and Congresswoman Escobar, as well as mocking the deaths of migrant children. Into that environment, we walked into this
They weren't,
facility.
but let's go ahead.
We were asked to surrender our phones and be guarded by the people without a guarantee that no one there was in that Facebook group. We went in and one of the officers.
Huh. Sounds like that would be a really good case for a, I don't know, concealed carry permit? Perhaps that would be a case for you to have bodyguards who have concealed firearms? Huh. Sounds like one argument isn't actually something you'd like to apply to the rest of your philosophy.
Attempted to sneak a photograph of myself and other congressional members. And at that point, we asked to enter one of the cells. We were allowed to speak to the women, and these are the women that we spoke to.
Don't care.
It's their handwriting. And while we are being asked to speak only to officers, we are not getting the accounts of migrants.
And what you're going to see is that documentation that she's submitting is just their signatures, not their accounts. So again, don't care.
Of their treatment, of what they are experiencing. And so when these women tell me that they were put into a cell and that their sink was not working, and we tested the sink ourselves and the sink was not working, and they...
Right, so there's a unit that they have combined the sink and the toilet into one fixture. However, the sink is separate from the toilet because that's how things work, right? If you have a house and inside the house is a door and a floor, the door and the floor are not the same thing because they are within the same house. The door and the window are not the same thing because they're in the same house. Or even if they're attached, there is a door and there's a window. In this case, there's a sink and there is a toilet. Also, what she doesn't mention is that in all of these facilities, in addition to the sink and the toilet, there are water fountains. They are supplied with bottled water. So even if this is 100% true, what about the bottled water? What about the water fountain?
We're told to drink out of a toilet bowl. I believed them. I believed these women. I believed the canker sores that I saw in their mouths because they were only allowed to be fed unnutritious food.
Baloney. Number one, if you're so worried about the amount of food that they're getting and the quality of the nutrition of the food that they were getting, then perhaps the Border Patrol needs more money to buy some food that they can actually afford that would have greater nutritional value, because food with greater nutritional value tends in general to be more expensive than food with crappy nutritional value. Also, the overwhelming majority of migrants who are detained by ICE or the Border Patrol are dehydrated heavily when they are found. So, wait, how do we know that this dehydration, or the symptoms of dehydration, didn't happen before they were detained? We don't.
I believed them when they said they were sleeping on concrete floors for 2 months.
So give Border Patrol money so that they can provide cots, so that they can provide bedding of some sort. This is the whole reason this has become a crisis. It's because they have been inundated with people who are making asylum claims. They have no way to process them in a manner that is in any way efficient because they just don't have the money to do this. And it's your side that doesn't want to give them that money. So, again, you lose my sympathy.
Believe them. And what was worse about this, Mr. Chairman, was the fact that there were American flags hanging all over these facilities, that children were being separated from their parents in front of an American flag.
Okay, so we have to rewind the tape. This is where the insanity ensues. So let's rewind this tape.
And what was worse about this, Mr. Chairman, was the fact that there were American flags hanging all over these facilities.
At the American Border Patrol facilities. Oh my God. What flag do you think would be hanging at a United States Border Patrol facility? For crying out loud, Alexandria, the overwhelming majority of these people that are crossing this border are doing it in areas where it's extremely difficult to tell where the border actually is. You go to southeast Arizona, and the geography and the topography do not change for hundreds of miles before you find a change in topography or geography. There are no indicators that you've crossed the border. In many places in southeastern Arizona, there's no fence, there's no river, there's nothing to indicate that you've crossed the border. There's extremely sparse population. There are almost no roads. How do they even know that they've crossed the border? How do they know that? How do they know that where they're being brought to is United States soil? How do they know that they're at a Border Patrol facility, especially if they're people who can't read in English? And by the way, a huge portion of these people that are crossing the border aren't literate in their own language. I mean, this is just utter nonsense. What flag would you prefer that we have at the United States Border Patrol? Right? That you're crossing this border. There should not be any flag at any federal facility, other than the flag of our republic. Like when you take the Pledge of Allegiance in the morning at school, right? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and the republic for which it stands. Have I spelled that out slowly and clearly enough for you? The flag stands for the Republic of the United States because we are a constitutional representative republic. For God's sakes, the whole point of having that flag there is to tell people you are in the United States, and these are the values that we hold true, that we hold dear. Right? We find these truths to be self-evident. Right? That's the point of that flag. And for you to insinuate that it is insulting or in some way an offensive thing to have a United States flag at a United States Border Patrol facility seems to me to indicate that you don't actually believe that the United States is a just country a priori, right? You do not believe that the United States has a right to exist, right? And if that's not the case, then please tell me that that's not the case, and then I'd love to hear some sort of evidence to support the claim that you actually believe that the United States has a right to exist, because this is just antithetical to that notion. Of course there are going to be American flags at the Border Patrol facilities. God!
That children are being separated from their parents in front of an American flag.
Would you prefer that we do it in front of a swastika?
That women were being called these names under an American flag.
You'll see in a moment, because these tears suddenly go away very quickly, that this is all an act. And by the way, I don't have sympathy for your emotive response. I care about your content, not your emotions. Facts don't care about your feelings, not the other way around.
We cannot allow for this.
All right, I don't know exactly what this interruption is. I think somebody needs some medical attention here at the end of this row. The next minute of tape is just them tending to this person. It turns out they're all right. They take a recess. They come back, and you'll see that the moment the camera even pans back, and I'm not going to show it, but the moment the camera even glances over to AOC, the crocodile tears have mysteriously gone away. So no, this is scripted. This is nonsense. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I just don't care.